Have you ever noticed how a seemingly simple law can suddenly become a huge political controversy?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Well, that's kind of what happened with this Waqf Amendment Bill in the Lok Sabha.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't just some ordinary debate. Congress MP Gaurav Gogoi used some pretty strong words.
Oh, really? Like what?
He actually called it a 4D attack, which really makes you wonder what's actually going on here.
Right, because obviously there are two completely different sides to this story.
Exactly. And that's why we're doing this deep dive today.
Yeah.
We really want to understand the core of this debate.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out what exactly is behind these accusations and the government's justifications. So maybe we should start with this whole 4D attack thing.
Yeah, let's do that.
Gogoi broke it down into four main areas of concern, right?
Right.
And the first one is diluting the Constitution.
Hmm.
Now, he didn't really specify exactly which parts of the bill do this, at least not in the stuff we've been looking at. But the worry seems to be that these amendments kind of chip away at those fundamental protections, you know?
The ones guaranteed by the Constitution.
No, especially for minorities.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he's setting the stage for a broader argument about the bill's impact.
Makes sense. It's like laying the groundwork.
Okay, so then he goes on to the second D, defaming minorities. And again, it doesn't seem to be about any specific bad language in the bill itself. More like the idea that the bill, either in what it says or how it's being presented, could create a negative image of these groups, unfairly targeting them.
Right, like it's contributing to an atmosphere of distrust.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So then we come to the third G, and this is where Gogoi gets very specific. Disenfranchising.
Okay, what's he saying about that?
Well, his issue is with a certain part of the bill that apparently says a Muslim person has to have been practicing their faith for at least 5 years before they can donate to Waqf properties.
5 years.
5 years, yep. And he sees this as trying to limit people's ability to be involved in their own religious practices.
Yeah, I can see why.
Especially when it comes to charity, because of this, well, kind of strange rule about how long you've been a practicing Muslim.
Wow.
It makes you think, like, is the government now going to be in charge of deciding who's religious enough to donate?
That's a good point.
He even asks, who's going to be issuing these religious certificates, which just highlights how much power this could give the government.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then he compares it to other religions.
Like what?
Like, what if you had to prove you'd been going to temple or Gurdwara for 5 years to donate?
Oh, I see, to illustrate the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It really emphasizes how unfair this 5-year rule seems and how discriminatory it could be.
Yeah, it's a thought-provoking argument.
Definitely makes you think about the government trying to define religious practice. And then that takes us to the final D, dividing society.
Okay, how's that connected?
Well, Gogoi's argument is that all these other points, weakening constitutional rights, possibly defaming minorities, and this disenfranchisement thing, they all lead to creating bigger divisions in Indian society.
Mm-hmm. It's like a ripple effect.
He sees the bill as having a much bigger impact on society, not just about property.
It goes beyond property management.
Right. And then, besides these four main accusations, Gogoi also raises another important concern. He worries that this whole Waqf property thing might just be a test run for the government.
Like a trial balloon.
Yeah. He's afraid that if they can change the rules for these religious properties, they might try to do the same for other land owned by minorities in the future.
So it's like a slippery slope argument.
Right. And it's not just about this one bill.
It's about setting a precedent.
Exactly. And that brings us to the government side of all this.
Yeah, how do they respond to these claims?
Well, Union Minister Kiren Rijiju had a pretty strong rebuttal to Gogoi's 4D attack, and he actually directed a lot of his criticism back at the UPA government.
Interesting. Tell me more about that.
His point is that the amendments they made to the Waqf laws in 2013, those actually gave too much power to Waqf laws, what he called an overriding effect.
Overriding.
Yeah, like they basically put Waqf laws above other existing legislation, and he says that's why these new amendments are needed.
To even things out, in his view.
Exactly. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Rijiju claims that the UPA government actually transferred a bunch of properties, like 123 of them, to the Delhi Waqf Board.
Okay, that's a lot.
And get this, he specifically mentioned the CGO complex and the Parliament building as examples.
Wow.
If that's true, it definitely changes how we view this whole situation.
No kidding.
To think that major government buildings could have been under the control of a Waqf Board because of old laws.
It's almost unbelievable.
So Rijiju is basically saying these amendments aren't some kind of attack, but a way to fix what he sees as a huge overreach by the previous government.
Makes you wonder what the UPA was thinking.
I know, right? And then Rijiju makes it very clear that these amendments are only about managing Waqf properties.
So he's saying they have nothing to do with religious institutions themselves.
That's exactly what he says. He wants to emphasize the separation between the administrative stuff and the religious aspects, implying that the opposition is misinterpreting things.
Okay, but I guess that's the heart of the disagreement, right?
Yeah, because Gogoi and the opposition argue that you can't just separate those two things.
It's all connected.
Right. They say this bill weakens those constitutional protections for minorities, and that it's a deliberate strategy with much wider political and social goals.
It's like they think there's a hidden agenda.
It's not just a simple change to property laws, according to them. And Gogoi even goes so far as to say that this is all a move to influence elections and create divisions in society.
You mean by potentially marginalizing minorities?
That's his take. It just shows how much distrust there is on both sides.
Yeah, huge implications.
And he even brought up how Muslims in some BJP-ruled states are allegedly being restricted from offering Eid prayers in public.
Like he's saying this is part of a bigger pattern.
It seems like he thinks this whole bill might be a distraction from those other issues.
Trying to deflect attention away from things that could hurt the government politically.
Classic political strategy. Now, the way this bill was reviewed also caused some problems. Gogoi was pretty critical of the Joint Parliamentary Committee, the JPC.
The one that looked at these amendments?
Yeah. He pointed out that it was led by someone from the BJP.
So right off the bat, there's potential for bias.
And then he says that most of the amendments proposed by the opposition were rejected.
Oh, that's not good.
Like a big majority of them. But on the other hand, many amendments from the BJP and its allies were accepted.
So there's a clear imbalance there.
And for Gogoi, that speaks volumes about how fair the review process actually was.
Yeah, it raises some serious questions about the committee's objectivity.
He's essentially saying that they weren't really open to different opinions, and that the outcome was mostly decided by the ruling party's majority.
Sounds like it was more about pushing an agenda than genuine debate.
But here's what's really shocking. Gogoi claims that the notes written by opposition members where they disagreed with the report were initially taken out of the final JPC report.
They were removed.
He says they were only put back in after protests.
That's messed up.
He's been in Indian politics for a long time, and he says he's never seen a JPC work this way before.
It really shows how much disagreement and maneuvering there was around this bill.
So when we step back and look at everything, it's obvious that this Waqf Amendment Bill has become a massive issue in Indian politics.
No kidding.
You've got the government insisting they're just making things more efficient and fixing mistakes from the past.
But then you have the opposition claiming it's a direct attack on minority rights.
With potentially huge consequences. It all comes down to how you interpret the bill's true intentions and what you think the effects will be.
Yeah. Is it just about administration, like the government claims? Or does it go much deeper, affecting minority rights, elections, and even social harmony like the opposition worries?
And both sides have presented their arguments very strongly.
Showing just how complicated and controversial this whole thing is.
It really gets you thinking, you know? When you consider the history of Waqf properties in India, along with all these debates about laws and minority rights, it raises questions about finding that balance in a diverse society.
A very delicate balance.
What are the long-term consequences of these very different interpretations? And how will this impact the relationship between the government and minorities going forward?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
And that's exactly what we wanted to explore in this deep dive.
To get to the heart of the matter.
Exactly.
And hopefully leave our listeners with some food for thought.